Hello and welcome to another collection video, and this time around it's PAL Saturn games, starting with Sonic R. Now I'm not doing any particular order, as just like previous videos, but Sonic R is a great game. I really like it. Fully 3D Sonic game at a time when there really wasn't anything quite like that. It's a racing game, of course. For those not familiar with it, I think it's a really fun racing game. The characters race on foot. Amy races in a car for some reason, because I guess she's not as fast as the rest of the characters. I think this version is on them plastic cases, which are durable but incredibly heavy. If you're carrying a big stack of Saturn games around, yeah, it does weigh a bit. And you've got your manual there, but yeah, I really like Sonic R. I know it's not to everyone's taste, but it's got one of the greatest soundtracks in video game history. Upbeat, dancey, fun music, actually great lyrics as well. They're simplistic lyrics, but they're catchy and you sing along, so Sonic R does its job. Controls maybe a bit slippery for some at first, but spend a little time with it, get used to it, and there's a lot to enjoy in Sonic R. Moving on to Johnny Bazooka Tone. So this is an interesting one. Again, it's actually got a really good soundtrack, and the soundtrack is so good that they even include, as the case falls apart, this is the problem with some Saturn cases, this is a slightly different case to the last, they include the soundtrack there. The platform game itself is a little difficult, I'd say. It's quite harsh. It does have a few relatively unique ideas. The game doesn't really tell you how to do anything, so you have to work out all of Johnny Bazooka Tone's moves for yourself, and he's got a few of them. But once you've got to grips with them, the game's kind of gets fun, but the problem is it's quite frustrating. Here's some wonderful review scores here. You got to learn this game a bit. It's not immediately accessible, I wouldn't say. Perhaps with a bit more time with it and a bit more learning, I might enjoy it more. It's a little frustrating, but not bad. Not bad by any means. I don't think anyway. International Victory Goal, or V-Goal, as it says behind there. This is a good, fun, simple, arcade-style football game. Plays well. I'm not a connoisseur of football titles, but if you want one for the Saturn, I think this does the job very well. More Sonic again. It's Sonic Jam, a compilation of Sonic 1, 2, 3 and Knuckles, as you can see on the back there, with a bonus 3D world Sonic can traverse in, other than Sonic R. It's the other way you can play Sonic in 3D space. Of course there's Sonic 3D, but technically that's not 3D. Anyway, yeah, it's got lots of bonus stuff in it, and it's a great way to play those original Mega Drive Sonic games, so I can recommend that. Moving on to Sonic 3D, as we just mentioned. Technically isn't 3D, but it's isometric, and I've always liked Sonic 3D. Oh, there is a 3D special stage in this Saturn version, and a CD soundtrack, of course, to differentiate this one from the Mega Drive version. So this is, yeah, the best way to play Sonic 3D. Maybe I actually first played the PC version of this game, which also I found very good. It had the same sort of soundtrack. So check it out, Sonic 3D. So on to Virtua Fighter. Now I don't think the Saturn port's quite arcade accurate. It's still fun. It always felt very zoomed out to me, and I'd rather play Virtua Fighter 2 if I had the choice. However, I do find these polygonal, is that a word? The characters, where they're constructed out of polygons in this game, to be quite appealing. Of course, in Japan there was Virtua Fighter Remix, which actually added textures to these characters. I think that took away a little from their retro appeal, but arguably Virtua Fighter Remix is a better game. But here is the original Virtua Fighter, and it's still playable on the Saturn. Still pretty fun. Just if you have a choice, go for Virtua Fighter 2, I'd say. Okay, we're going to do these two together because it makes sense. Clockwork Knight, Clockwork Knight 2. Both very similar to each other. They're both platform games. and it's kind of like Toy Story on the Mega Drive, because you're in that sort of how do you say it, miniaturized world. Clockwork Knight jumps around, attacks enemies, does boss fights. It's pseudo 3D. There are 3D elements in the game, and it's actually very playable. Clockwork Knight 2 throws you right in the deep end with a boss fight. It's one of those boss fights at the beginning of games which you can always beat and they're not too hard. But I find that the character, Clockwork Knight, controls better in this version. Slightly better. I mean, he doesn't control badly in the original, but the control is slightly more refined in Clockwork Knight 2. Both fun games, both recommended if you like platform games. 2D platform games, that is. So, Alien Trilogy, 3D first-person shooter. I find the environments at the beginning of the game a little samey, all the same sort of corridors and such. But actually it's a fun game, it's well made, and there is a variety in the levels, but yeah, initially I guess I was just sort of disappointed that everything sort of looked the same. If you compare it to something like Quake anyway, or Exhumed, everything is a little bit samey looking until you get to the next levels, but plays well. Enemies are 2D, which isn't bad. I like the idea that if you kill an enemy you've got to watch out for their blood, which is poisonous, so watch out that don't step in the alien blood after you've killed an alien. Also, it's a bit of a maze type game, got to find your way out of the levels. Pretty good game. Steep Slope Sliders is a fun trick based snowboarding game. I still quite enjoy this game. I think it's one of the better snowboarding games I've played, and if you're after something for the Saturn snowboarding, then this comes quite highly recommended. Characters look a little bit disappointing on the character select screen, but don't let that put you off. Steep Slope Sliders is a fun snowboarding game for the Sega Saturn. Max TT is, again, I find it good arcade style fun, nice and challenging. The arcade mode, Saturn modes on this, you can use 3D control pad as well, didn't realise that. The Saturn mode features a little bit more variety. So you can get about 4 tracks, I think, on that one, but I'm not sure if there's 2 technically, and the other 2 are just variations of those. The arcade mode just gives you the 1 track. But I find this plays really well and it's very fun. It's got great music, so it's not an expensive game. I think it's well worth checking out on Saturn. And here's Road Rash for the Saturn. So I heard great things about the 3DO version of Road Rash, which this is essentially the same game. It's also available on PlayStation. So I don't have the game on 3DO, but I do, or PlayStation, we do have the Saturn version, which plays extremely well. It comes very highly recommended, this version of Road Rash. This is the one that's 3D. At least the environments are. I think the races are 2D, but really fun, good soundtrack, and it comes in one of those weird EA boxes. So EA love having their own sort of cases or shaped cartridges. So this is the EA Saturn case. Looks like, so that's Road Rash, great game. So moving on to Tomb Raider, and yeah, Tomb Raider on the Saturn plays fine. It may be slightly inferior to the PlayStation version in terms of maybe frame rate and sharper graphics, but perfectly playable on the Saturn. A great game for anyone who's familiar with Tomb Raider. I assume most of you are. First played Tomb Raider back on the PC. I have it on PC, PlayStation and Saturn, and it's a good game on all 3. So moving along now to Quake. Now this is the game I've been playing on Saturn the most lately. Quake on Saturn is fantastic. If you were to see this game running, you'd think that, yeah, across the board Saturn was able to do amazing 3D, because Lobotomy have just, that's the studio who, the Disc Loose, who did this port of Quake, done an exceedingly good job, and it works well on the Saturn controller as well. Even if you're not using the 3D controller, this is compatible with. It's got the original soundtrack, and yeah, great atmosphere, great graphics. It's a great game, holds up very well in the Saturn version. So Wrestlemania, the arcade game, is very much that. It's an arcade style wrestling game, taking plenty of inspiration from Mortal Kombat, but also it's got a sense of humour too, which is great. You have very over the top moves. I guess the modern day equivalent of this game would be WWE 2K Battlegrounds. But yeah, it plays very well. It's fast, it's fun, and you've got a reasonable amount of classic wrestlers. So I can recommend WWF Wrestlemania, the arcade game. And now we have Worms. Oh, Worms! How I do love the... Yes, Worms on the Saturn is great, plays great. A little confusing at first, I suppose, if you're coming to it without playing the original Worms for a while, is you've got to make sure you select a human player as opposed to a computer player. So otherwise you just watch the computer play itself. But if you select human player, play against computer, yeah, it's great. Make all your teams as normal. Plays really well. So I can recommend Worms on the Saturn as well. Here's a game I've not actually played for a long while. I meant to get around to playing all of these ahead of this video, but Creature Shock I couldn't quite bring myself to play. Creature Shock was a game I first played back on the CDI, and I find it interesting. It really proclaims quite proudly on the front of the case that it's a multi-disc game. It contains multi-disc gameplay. So what that means is you have to swap the disc. Is a 2-disc. Now I don't think this doesn't have the manual, but Creature Shock is an FMV based adventure game. So you move from one pre-rendered FMV sequence to the next. Also mentions ray tracing, a term we're very familiar with nowadays, but interesting to see it here on a game that was from, what year would this have been? I'm not sure exactly. The Saturn era, 94, sorry, 94. So it's published by Data East, developed by Argonaut. Pretty ambitious 3D game for the time, but it was an FMV based game, hence why it's on 2 CDs. Winter Heat, Sega Sports, is a sequel to Athlete Kings. I'm fairly certain. Yes, it says on the top, the sequel to Athlete Kings. So this is Sega's Olympic game. It's based around the Winter Olympics. Really high-res graphics in this game. Looks nice. Can never really get into these. I bought this on the strength of it's a great Sega franchise on the Saturn. At the Athlete Kings one, this was fairly affordable. But you know, it's one of those things where I bought this, even though I know I'm not a big fan of Olympics games. But I've got one now, Winter Heat. If I have a situation where maybe a friend of mine wants to play some of these type of sports games on the Saturn, I have this option. It's a fine game, it's just not really my cup of tea. This is more my kind of thing. Night Warriors Darkstalkers Revenge is really good. It's the sequel to Darkstalkers, and yeah, it's very fun. It's a 2D fighting game featuring loads of monsters and such, werewolves and vampires. I couldn't think of the word there. and vampire hunters, a great cast of characters. This is where the character Morrigan comes from. He's an extremely popular Capcom character. He features only, very small illustration here on the front. That's Night Warriors Darkstalkers Revenge, great 2D beat 'em up from Capcom. I can't say the same about this game. This is Dragon Ball Z The Legend. This is a 2D fighting game. However, I find it unplayable. It moves far too fast, especially since when you go into playing this game, you have no idea how to play it. And it's very different from any other fighting game I've ever played. It's an emphasis on aerial combat. But yeah, it moves so fast. You can have not just one player, but a team of, I think, 4 players fighting against, I'm not even sure how many other players, but because I've never spent much time with this, because it is a game, as soon as I start playing it I want to turn it off, and as much as I like that cover and like Dragon Ball in general, I can't recommend this. This is also the Portuguese version, because to my memory it was only released in certain territories in Europe, not the UK, so I don't think there's an English version of this, but let me know if I'm wrong. Of course you could get the Japanese version, and I'd probably be able to work out better what was in the Japanese version than the Portuguese, but here it is, it's part of the collection. Tempest 2000 is Tempest, and for those familiar with Tempest, for those not familiar, should I say, with Tempest, it's an arcade style game where you fly a little spaceship. Basically you can't move from the rim of this cylinder, and you fire down the cylinder and shoot at aliens before they get to you, and if they get to you they can kill you, and then it's game over. And that's basically what it is. So you play as a sort of yellow U shape in the game, as you can see on the back, but obviously here this is what you're meant to be, a sort of TIE fighter like spaceship. It's a fun, fast arcade game. There's not much to it really. You could probably grow tired of this rather quickly, but in short bursts, Tempest 2000 is a lot of fun, and it is, interestingly enough, possibly the only version to reason to own a Jaguar console. But when you can get other consoles like Saturn, there's no need to own a Jaguar. That's because there aren't many great games on the Jaguar, unless you really like Bubsy or want the version of Rayman, I think that was on Jaguar. Here's D, made by Warp. D is a FMV based puzzle game, but it's got a heck of a lot of atmosphere, a heck of a lot of clever ideas. It's a really nice game, but if you don't like FMV, and if you don't like moving from one pre-rendered sequence to another, then you're not going to enjoy this. But I like it. It taps into my CDI nostalgia, but it's also a very spooky, atmospheric game, well worth checking out. Actua Golf next. Yeah, it's a golf game. This plays fine. If you want a golf game for Saturn, you know, you couldn't do wrong really with this one. Up to 4 players. Golf game after all. Yeah, it's good, but not much more to say about that. It was cheap. Next we have 3D Lemmings, which, as much as I like Lemmings, I can't say I'm a fan of 3D Lemmings. I just don't think Lemmings works in 3D. But being a collector of Lemmings games, I do own this game. Even though I should have known better. I think I played it first on PlayStation and realised I didn't like it. But here is the Saturn version, so if I ever feel like giving Lemmings 3D another chance, I could play it. The Saturn, or the PlayStation, or the PC. I think that's it. Exhumed is the European release of a game called Power Slave, which is an original first-person studio from Lobotomy Software, as you see here. Now, they handled both the Duke Nukem and Quake ports, if I am correct. Definitely did Quake. And yeah, it's a clever 3D shooter. Some great ideas in there. Looks fantastic. Another great show of how good the Saturn can, you know, accomplish 3D graphics, because it's not a console that's known for it. But I totally recommend Exhumed. And nearly the last of the games we've got here, it's Sega Ages, one of the more recent Saturn games I picked up. Sega Ages is a compilation of Afterburner 2, Space Harrier and Outrun, as you see on the front there, and it's, you know, fairly arcade accurate ports of all those games, and is perhaps the best way of playing them, you know, nowadays. Unless you have a Switch, you might want to play the Switch version of Outrun and Space Harrier. I can't recall if Afterburner 2 is on the Switch or not in the Sega Ages collection. But this collection, you do get Afterburner 2, and what I like about having this on Saturn is I've also got the Saturn Mission Stick. So Mission Stick is like a flight stick for the Saturn, which is great for playing all three of these games. Even Outrun you could play it with if you really wanted to, but I do have the wheel I could use for that. Okay, so lastly, just a few bits and pieces. Here is disc 1 of Panzer Dragoon Saga, a very expensive game on the Saturn. This disc came free with a magazine, which was the official Sega Saturn magazine, which was an amazing giveaway at the time. You get about an hour of gameplay on this disc. It's great to have. For me, someone who doesn't necessarily get very far in adventure RPG type games, then this is a great taster for me, so I can try out Panzer Dragoon Saga without paying the extreme prices for the full game. Volume 3 demo disc. You've got videos of these games here, but you've also got playable demos of Virtual On, Daytona USA, Tomb Raider and Sega Worldwide Soccer 97. Here is Spot Goes to Hollywood, the sequel to Cool Spot for Sega Saturn. Isometric platform action game. Haven't played it very much, but from what other people say, it's not really worth spending the time with. I have it, I may give it another shot another time. Bug for the Saturn. This was a game that I really wanted. When I had a little leaflet for the Sega Saturn and was sort of pining over owning one, Bug was the game that really caught my attention, and I just love the character design of Bug, and it's a pretty unique 3D platform game with 2D sprite in a 3D world, but it's not the best. It's quite tricky. It's alright, but you could do better. Never played the sequel, Bug 2, but if I could suggest a 3D platformer for the Saturn, it would probably be one of the Clockwork Knight games. But thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this look at my Sega Saturn collection. There's Clockwork Knight, just for a reminder. And I'll probably do more of these collection videos going forward. As I said previously, it's easier if I do collections which are slightly smaller, like the Saturn collection. But let me know if you liked it by liking the video. If you like this kind of content, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you again for another video. It is goodbye and game on. See ya!